She thought she was marrying a nobody, a janitor with kind eyes and calloused hands. No one knew. No one was supposed to find out. But when the church doors swung open and the royals stepped inside, everything shattered. Secrets broke free. Her name. His past. Their fate. One vow changed everything. Who was he really? And why did the king's crest shimmer on his sleeve? Emily Preston was never allowed to make mistakes. Born into the kind of wealth that made rules bend and doors open, she was raised in a world of perfect manners and arranged expectations. Her mother once told her love was a luxury only the poor believed in. So when Emily first met Noah, quiet, tall, and always mopping the marble floors of her family's estate, she thought nothing of it. He wore a blue janitor's uniform, always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and kept his eyes down. But one rainy afternoon changed that. She had slipped on the stairs near the east wing, and he was there before she hit the ground. "Are you okay, Miss Preston?" he had asked, his voice soft but steady. For the first time in her life, someone saw her, not as a trophy or future political bride, but just Emily. That was how it began. Short conversations in passing. An extra napkin on her tray. A book he left for her on the bench. It was innocent. Then it wasn't. The first time they kissed was behind the garden shed after a thunderstorm. She had never felt anything so real. But they both knew what they were doing was dangerous. Emily was expected to marry well, European royalty, if her father had his way. Her family's legacy depended on alliances, not affection. And Noah. He was nothing more than the help in everyone's eyes. But in hers, he was kind, patient, and the only person who never asked her to be someone else. They began to see each other in secret. Emily would sneak out of charity galas to meet him behind the greenhouse. Noah was careful, always reminding her of the risks, but she didn't care. He made her laugh. He made her feel. He made her want to run away from everything she was born into. Over time, their love grew deeper, stronger, more defiant. She told him she wanted to marry him. He said no at first, said it wasn't fair to her. But she insisted. "I'd rather have one honest life with you than 1,000 perfect lies with someone else." He nodded, eyes glistening, and finally agreed. They planned it in whispers. A small countryside church, far from the city, with no guests, no cameras, no expectations. Just them and their vows. Emily bought a plain white dress online and kept it hidden in her closet behind rows of designer gowns. Noah borrowed a suit from a friend. They picked a date. Every night leading up to it, Emily lay in bed, heart pounding, wondering if she was doing the right thing. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman finally choosing her own life, not the one scripted for her. On the morning of the wedding, Emily slipped out of her family's estate before sunrise. She wore no makeup, just a smile. Noah was already at the church, pacing nervously. When he saw her, he froze. "You look like you," he said. She laughed, and for a moment, the world faded. They were just two people in love. No titles. No rules. No fear. As they stood before the old wooden altar, Emily felt her hands shake. The air was quiet. The priest smiled gently and opened his book. She looked at Noah, and he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. For the first time in her life, Emily felt free. But freedom always has a price. Emily grew up in a house where silence was golden, and secrets were wrapped in smiles. Her father, Harold Preston, was not just a respected diplomat, he was feared in political circles. His hand reached into embassies, royal courts, and multinational banks. Behind every charity gala or award ceremony, there were whispered deals and nods that meant more than any signature. Emily knew her family didn't just have money. They had power. And power came with rules. Her mother, Evelyn, was the master of appearances. She believed emotions were a weakness to be trained out of a person, especially a daughter with the Preston name. From an early age, Emily was groomed to walk beside kings, to sit beside leaders, and most of all, to marry strategically. She had tutors in politics before she had braces. Her smile was polished like a speech, and her future had already been planned out like a state dinner menu. Her father had chosen a suitor, Prince Adrian of Norwich, a young royal whose family had been allies with the Prestons for generations. On paper, Adrian was perfect. Tall, well-educated, calm under pressure. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unkind. But he wasn't Noah. Emily had met Adrian once at a charity auction. They exchanged pleasantries. He shook her hand like he was closing a business deal. He talked about trade agreements and diplomatic dinners. When she smiled politely, he nodded in approval. That was the moment she realized. He didn't want a wife. He wanted an asset. A pawn that would fit neatly into his family's image. And Emily. She wasn't sure who she was anymore when she stood in his shadow. Still, she kept the relationship with Noah hidden. There were close calls. A maid once saw her sneaking out after midnight. A security guard noticed her slipping through the garden gate. But she always had an excuse. Always smiled just right. Always played the part. Inside, though, she was unraveling. Her father's pressure grew stronger. "You'll be the woman beside the next generation of kings," he said during one of their tense dinners. "Do you understand the weight of that? Love is fleeting, Emily. Legacy is forever." She wanted to scream. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded, picked up her fork, and went back to eating her salmon while her heart screamed for Noah. There were nights when she'd sneak out just to sit in Noah's small apartment on the edge of the estate grounds. He didn't have much. A broken lamp. A sagging couch. A cracked window that whistled when the wind blew. But it felt more like home than the mansion ever had. He'd make tea. They'd talk about nothing. She'd curl up beside him in his worn-out sweatshirt and feel whole. "They'll never let us be," she whispered once. He pulled her close and said, "Then we won't ask their permission." That line stuck with her. It repeated in her mind like a heartbeat every time her parents handed her another invitation to an event where Adrian would be present. Every time her mother adjusted her dress. Every time the staff whispered behind her back. Her world was a beautiful cage, and she had found the only key, in the hands of a man who swept the floors her family walked on. 1 week before the wedding, her father called a family meeting. The kind where no one dared speak until he had finished. He announced that the engagement with Prince Adrian would be made public the following month. Photographers had been hired. A spread in a major magazine was already scheduled. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "But we're not engaged," she said quietly. Her father narrowed his eyes. "You will be. It's already in motion. You don't have to love him, Emily. You just have to stand next to him and smile. The rest will follow." She stared at her parents, both so proud, so certain, and knew right then, they would never understand. They didn't want her happiness. They wanted control. And she had no intention of being their puppet anymore. That night, she packed a bag. Just a small one. The dress stayed hidden. The ring Noah had given her, a simple silver band with no diamond, stayed tucked close to her heart. She sent one text, "Still on. Sunday. I'll be there." Noah replied within seconds, "I'll be waiting." From that moment on, Emily walked through her days like a ghost. She smiled at her mother's questions. Nodded during her father's planning sessions. Let Adrian kiss her hand. But her heart was already at that countryside church. Her mind was already whispering vows. She was scared. Not of marrying Noah, but of what would happen if they were found out. Her family didn't handle betrayal well. They controlled outcomes. They silenced problems. She had seen it before. An aide who spoke too freely was sent overseas. A cousin who fell for a commoner was disowned. She wasn't stupid. She knew what could come. But she also knew this. For the first time in her life, she was choosing herself. She was choosing love, not image. And no amount of legacy could keep her from it. The Preston name was heavy, yes. But her heart had finally found a way to breathe. The morning of the wedding arrived like a whisper. The sky was overcast, grey clouds casting soft shadows over the countryside road that led to the small chapel. Emily had left the house before the staff woke, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, her wedding dress folded carefully in a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The car she borrowed from a friend rolled through the quiet streets unnoticed. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, but her mind was clear. She wasn't running away. She was walking toward something, toward someone who made her feel alive. Every mile put distance between her and the life she'd been trapped in, and every turn brought her closer to Noah. Noah had arrived an hour earlier. He paced outside the stone chapel, the hem of his borrowed suit brushing against the damp grass. The suit didn't quite fit right, the cuffs too long, the jacket a little loose, but he didn't care. He carried no flowers, no rings carved in gold, just a quiet determination in his chest. Inside the church, a kind old priest prepared for the ceremony. There were no decorations.
No guests. No cameras.
Just an altar, wooden benches, and the thick silence that made everything feel even more real. When Emily's car finally pulled up, Noah turned to see her stepping out, holding the dress with one hand, her hair tied back, her face bare and glowing with something raw and honest. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Noah walked over and wrapped her in his arms. No words. Just the kind of embrace that says everything. They changed inside the tiny church office. Emily slipped into the simple white dress. No lace, no diamonds, just soft fabric and a quiet promise. She looked at herself in the mirror and didn't see the diplomat's daughter or the bride of a prince. She saw a woman who had finally taken control. Noah stood by the door, watching her, breath caught in his chest. "You're sure?" he asked, even now giving her a chance to walk away. Emily smiled and nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." They took each other's hands and walked toward the altar. The priest welcomed them with a warm smile, his voice gentle. "Love doesn't ask permission," he said, opening his old leather-bound book. Emily stood across from Noah, their hands still clasped. The world outside faded. The chapel was quiet, save for the creak of wooden benches and the distant sound of birds in the trees. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Noah's eyes never left hers. "Today," the priest began, "we gather not in grand halls, but in a humble space where love, stripped of all titles and expectations, chooses to be seen." Emily blinked back tears. She hadn't cried in years, not since childhood. But something about those words cracked open the part of her heart she'd buried to survive. The vows were personal. There were no scripts. Noah went first. "I don't have much," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I can't promise castles or crowns. But I promise to wake up every day and choose you. To protect you. To laugh with you. To grow with you. To never let anyone or anything make you feel small again." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her tone. She looked at him, her heart full. "You've given me more than anyone ever has. You saw me when no one else did. You loved me not for who they said I was, but for who I am when all that falls away. I don't want a perfect life. I want a true one. With you." As they held each other's gaze, the priest began the final words. "Do you, Noah James, take Emily Preston to be your wife?" Noah smiled. "I do." "And do you, Emily Preston, take Noah James to be your husband?" Her lips trembled. "I do." The priest raised his hand. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and—" A loud bang echoed through the chapel. The old wooden doors slammed open with such force that the windows shook. Sunlight poured in, casting long shadows across the floor. Gasps followed. Heavy boots. Footsteps. Several men in tailored suits walked in first, their eyes sharp, their movements rehearsed. Behind them, 2 royal guards in deep navy uniforms. Then a figure stepped forward, regal posture, trimmed beard, polished shoes that clicked against the stone. And just behind him, a familiar face. Prince Adrian. Emily's breath hitched. Her father stood beside Adrian, cold eyes locked on his daughter. The room froze. The priest's book slipped from his hands and landed on the floor with a soft thud. Noah instinctively stepped in front of Emily, shielding her without thinking. The guards didn't draw weapons, but their presence said everything. The moment shattered. Her secret had been found. Her wedding had been discovered. The very thing she feared most, the moment the world she left behind would come storming in, had arrived. Her father's voice cut through the silence. "Emily Preston, what have you done?" The question wasn't shouted. It was soft. Deadly. Prince Adrian looked not angry but hurt. Betrayed. Like he had lost a pawn in a game he thought he was winning. Emily couldn't speak. Her throat burned. Her hands shook. Her world had just changed forever, and the ceremony wasn't even finished. The silence that followed was loud enough to feel. Emily stood frozen, still holding Noah's hand, though her grip was slipping. The church was no longer theirs. The quiet peace that had wrapped around them only seconds ago was shattered by the heavy footsteps of power and the cold eyes of judgment. Her father's face was unreadable, but the lines on his forehead and the tightness in his jaw made it clear this was not a visit. This was a reckoning. Behind him, Prince Adrian stood like a statue, his eyes not on her, but on Noah, as if searching for answers that no one had prepared him for. The two guards flanked the entrance, blocking the only way out, even though no one moved. It didn't feel like a wedding anymore. It felt like a courtroom. Emily's breath was stuck in her chest. Her lips parted but no words came out. Noah stood tall, not stepping back, not lowering his gaze. It was the first time Emily realized just how much strength he held inside. Her father stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing in the chapel. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked again, this time with more force. Emily swallowed hard and looked him in the eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I chose him." Her father scoffed, shaking his head as if she'd just confessed to something criminal. "You were supposed to marry a prince. You were supposed to secure the future of this family. Instead, you've thrown it away for a janitor." The word hit the room like a slap. Noah didn't flinch. He stood still, one hand behind Emily's back, calm in the storm. "She didn't throw anything away," he said quietly. "She followed her heart." Adrian stepped forward now, his expression not cold, but sad. "Emily, why didn't you tell me? I thought we had an understanding." Emily turned to face him. "We did. And that's all it was. An understanding. Not love. Not choice." Adrian looked down, ashamed, perhaps, more than hurt. He wasn't a villain. Just another piece in a system built on quiet deals and broken hearts. The room was still, everyone watching her, waiting for the next move. The priest tried to speak, to calm the rising tension, but one of the guards held up a hand. The message was clear. This wasn't a space for faith anymore. It was about control. Her father took another step, this time looking at Noah. "You think this is over? You think I'll let this stand?" Noah's jaw tightened. "It's not your decision," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only truth. Her father took a deep breath, then motioned to one of the suited men beside him. The man stepped forward, opened a folder, and pulled out a document. "Do you know who he really is?" he said, looking straight at Emily. "Because I do. And so do they." The word "they" landed like thunder. Emily's heart pounded. She looked at Noah, confused. "What is he talking about?" she asked. But Noah said nothing. His face had gone pale. Her father nodded at the suited man, who placed the document on the altar in front of them. "His name isn't just Noah James," her father continued. "His real name is Noah Alexander Halden, son of King Edward Halden, hidden away after the assassination of his family members. You didn't marry a janitor. You just married the last living heir of a royal bloodline thought to be extinct." Emily couldn't breathe. She stared at Noah, her vision blurring. "Is it true?" she asked. He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't want you to fall in love with a name. Or a story. I wanted you to love me. Just me." The world tilted. Everything she thought she knew collapsed under the weight of the truth. Her father kept speaking, but his voice faded into the background. He was hidden for his safety, raised in silence. But records were found. Fingerprints matched. The crown has been searching for him. And now he shows up here, marrying my daughter in secret. The guards stepped forward again. "We are here to escort Mr. Halden for questioning," one said. "There are political implications to this that cannot be ignored." Emily turned to them, stepping in front of Noah.
No.
"You're not taking him anywhere. Not today." Her voice cracked but held firm. The guard hesitated. Emily's father raised an eyebrow. "You would defy your own blood for a lie." She shook her head slowly. "For the truth. For love." Adrian finally spoke again. "Let them finish what they started. If anything, this union may be exactly what both sides need. Everyone turned to look at him. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his voice, relief, maybe. Or clarity. Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but even he knew this moment had slipped from his grip. The guards lowered their arms. The suited men stepped back. The storm passed, but the damage was done. Noah looked at Emily, eyes wet. I was going to tell you after the wedding. I just wanted one pure thing, free from all this. She nodded, her hands gripping his tighter. We'll figure it out. Together. The priest, still shaken, slowly picked up his book again. And then, with the shattered past behind them and an uncertain future ahead, the priest finally said the words they had been waiting to hear. You may now kiss the bride. The kiss wasn't just for love. It was for freedom. For truth. For everything they had risked. But even as their lips met, Emily knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The world knew now. The doors had opened. And nothing would ever be the same again. For most of his life, Noah lived in the quiet corners of other people's lives. He swept their floors, polished their glass, and disappeared before anyone ever really saw him. That was how he stayed safe. That was how he survived. The truth about who he was had been buried deep for years, hidden beneath a different name and a job that kept eyes away. But now, standing at the altar beside Emily, surrounded by shocked stares and guards dressed in royal colors, everything he had hidden was out in the open. The weight of it nearly dropped him to his knees. He had wanted to protect her from this, the history, the danger, the expectations. He had planned to tell her, just not yet. Not until they were already married. Not until he was certain she loved him for him. But now, the choice had been ripped from his hands. The name they said, Noah Alexander Halden, didn't feel like his. It was the name given to him by his birth parents, people he barely remembered. He had flashes, sometimes. A tall man in a dark uniform with a soft voice. A woman who smelled like lavender and used to sing when she thought no one could hear. But those memories were buried beneath something darker. The night they were taken. The screams. The fire. The sound of doors breaking open and men shouting. He had been only 6 years old when the attempt on the royal family had happened. The public was told the entire line had been wiped out. But Noah had been smuggled out by a loyal guard, placed in hiding, then moved from place to place. New names. New homes. Always looking over his shoulder. By the time he was a teenager, he was cleaning floors in a boarding school. Quiet. Careful. Invisible. That's when the guard who saved him finally told him the truth. That he was a Halden. That his life had been spared to protect a kingdom. But Noah didn't want it. He didn't want thrones or titles. He wanted peace. So he made a choice. He stayed hidden. When he took the janitor job at the Preston's estate, it was supposed to be temporary. A quiet place. A name they wouldn't look for. But then he saw her, Emily. At first from afar. Then up close. She was everything he'd been told not to trust. A symbol of the world that had almost killed him. But she was different. She smiled without calculation. She asked him questions and waited for the answers. She saw him. Falling in love with her was never the plan. But once it happened, he couldn't stop it. And when she asked him to marry her, he panicked. Told himself it would be okay. That if they kept things quiet, no one would ever know. But deep down, he knew secrets like his didn't stay hidden forever. Especially not when people had been looking. He had seen the signs a few months back, the strange phone calls at the estate, the private investigators asking questions, the sudden interest in background checks. The kingdom of Norwick had changed hands, and rumors of a lost heir had begun to spread again. His name had popped up in old documents that weren't destroyed. His fingerprints, taken once as a child in school, matched records in sealed royal archives. The web had started to close in. And now here they were. Married. Exposed. Surrounded. Noah looked around the church and felt the past rising like a tide. He could feel eyes studying him. Not as a janitor anymore. Not as the man Emily loved. But as a missing royal. As a symbol. A threat. A legacy. The pressure made it hard to breathe. He glanced at Emily, who hadn't let go of his hand. Her eyes were on him, full of questions, full of pain, but still full of love. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. His answer came slowly. "Because I didn't want you to marry a name. I wanted you to marry me. Just me." The men in suits spoke in low voices now, planning what would happen next. One of them stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, addressing Noah for the first time with the title he had spent a lifetime running from. "We must discuss your return to Norwich. The council will expect a meeting. Your presence is needed. There are questions only you can answer." The sound of it made Noah flinch. He didn't feel royal. He didn't want to be needed in that way. But the truth was, the world had changed. And he could no longer hide from it. Emily turned to the group. "He's not going anywhere without me," she said. Her voice was strong, clear. "If you take him, I go too." There was a murmur. Her father's jaw clenched. "Emily, don't be foolish. This is bigger than you." She snapped her head toward him.
No.
"It's exactly about me. About my choice. You wanted me to marry a prince. Well, guess what? I did. Just not the one you picked." That silenced the room. The priest, still standing in stunned silence, closed his book and backed away. The ceremony was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Noah stepped forward. "I'll go. I'll answer whatever questions they have. But Emily comes with me. As my wife." It was a quiet demand, not loud, but powerful. The guards exchanged glances. Then, slowly, one of them nodded. "Very well. But the journey will not be simple." Noah knew that already. Nothing from here on would be simple. But it was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to face the truth. He had spent his life avoiding the past. But maybe it was time to claim it. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to do it alone. The church emptied slowly, like a stage after the final act of a play no one saw coming. The guards stepped outside first, speaking in low voices into their radios. The suited men followed, flipping through papers, already planning the press strategy and official statements. Emily's father lingered at the back, quiet, unreadable, a storm behind a glass wall. Prince Adrian gave a final glance to Emily, not with anger, but with something like closure, then turned and left without a word. Only Emily and Noah remained at the altar, the place where everything changed. The light had shifted outside, casting long streaks through the stained glass windows. The colors danced on the floor between them like quiet reminders of what had just happened. The air felt different. Heavy. Changed. Noah sat on the front bench, elbows on his knees, hands folded, as if waiting for someone to wake him up from the dream. Emily stood beside him, her dress now wrinkled, her eyes tired but sharp. Neither spoke for a long while. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything that hadn't been said. Full of questions they didn't yet know how to ask. Finally, she sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "So," she whispered, "what happens now?" Noah let out a slow breath. "Now we face it." She nodded. Not because she had answers, but because she knew they were out of choices. The trip to Norwich was arranged quickly. A private jet. Security detail. Official escorts. Emily barely had time to pack. Her mother refused to speak to her. Her father sent only one message. "You made your choice. Don't expect help when it breaks you." Still, she didn't waver. As the plane took off, she reached for Noah's hand. He held it tightly, his eyes watching the clouds. The quiet man who once cleaned her family's floors now sat beside her, carrying a past that belonged to kings and a future neither of them could see clearly. When they landed, cameras flashed. Journalists shouted. Officials swarmed. But through it all, Emily didn't let go of his hand. They were taken to a secure building, not a palace but a government center. There were meetings, long ones. DNA tests were confirmed. Old documents surfaced. The seal of the Halden family matched the birthmark on Noah's shoulder, a mark no one had seen since the day he disappeared. It became clear quickly. He wasn't just a royal. He was the royal. The last true heir. His return changed everything. Some in Norwich celebrated. Others whispered fears. What did it mean for the ruling government? Would he claim the throne? Would he disappear again? Would he stay? Noah answered every question calmly. I don't want a crown, he told them. I want a life. A real one. With her. The royal council offered him a position. Not king, but figurehead. A chance to restore the Halden name without stepping into full rule. He could choose to lead from the side, as a symbol, a voice of peace. They promised protection. They offered a home. He asked for time. Meanwhile, Emily adjusted to a world she never imagined. She was introduced as Lady Emily Halden, a title she didn't ask for and still felt strange wearing. Her days were filled with handshakes, meetings, and eyes that studied her like a puzzle. Some judged. Some smiled. Some whispered about the girl who married a janitor and turned out to be royalty herself. Still, in quiet moments, it was just them. Sharing tea on a balcony overlooking the royal gardens. Walking hand in hand through halls lined with portraits of people Noah barely remembered. At night, they lay together, sometimes talking, sometimes just breathing. There were tears. There were laughs. There was fear. But there was love. Real, messy, brave love. And that, Emily kept telling herself, was worth everything. A year passed. The news moved on. Another royal scandal took the headlines. Another country fell into chaos. The world turned, as it always does. Noah and Emily stayed. He accepted the council's offer, becoming a quiet force of guidance for the country. Emily began charity work, using her past life connections to help rebuild parts of the nation that had been forgotten. Together, they created something new, something that didn't follow the script written by power-hungry families or old bloodlines. They wrote their own story. But some things were never spoken of again. Like the documents that went missing from the archives the day after Noah's identity was confirmed. Or the guard who once saved him, who vanished days before he could speak to the press. Or the small, hidden room under the royal estate that had been sealed for over 2 decades. The one with the family crest burned into the floorboards and a single child's drawing still tacked to the wall. Some things, even in love, remain hidden. Buried not in shame, but in fear. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Some are only meant to be carried. On the anniversary of their secret wedding, Noah and Emily returned to the same countryside church. The doors were still scratched. The altar still creaked. But this time, they didn't hide. They sat in the front row, no guards, no cameras. Just them. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out the same simple ring Noah gave her that day. She had it polished but never replaced. He smiled and slipped it back on her finger. I'd do it all over again, she said. Noah nodded. Me too. They sat in silence, hands locked, hearts full, their love no longer a secret, but still, in some small way, theirs alone.